There's a ground of support among and for the Asian American community right now, and attention from the media as well. Asian American communities were already grieving the numerous hate incidents all over the nation, and we too are, of course, grieving the loss of lives in Atlanta. For a year now, many in Asian American communities have warned about the increasing anti-Asian hate incidents due to COVID-19. Journalist and scholar Helen Zia wrote an op-ed warning about this a year ago. And these are attacks against Asian American women, children, and our most precious, our elders. So we really are coming together as a community in order to find solutions to stop these hate crimes from happening and to also educate on the history of Asian Americans in America.
And tell us more about the controversy over the way the shooter was initially portrayed by the police.
Sure. What really hurt the Asian American community here was we were made to feel invisible by that response. The spokesman stated that day that the shooter was just having a bad day. The facts: the shooter targeted Asian businesses. 6 of those who were killed were women of Asian descent. Regardless of motive, those were the facts. And for this police to speak so nonchalantly about the shooter's motive, this was appalling for many in the Asian American community, and it was racism at its worst, denial of racism.
Well, it certainly got people talking about hate crimes against Asian Americans, which, as you point out, has grown since the start of the pandemic. Just how much worse has it become?
Yes, as 2020 ticked by, really there was already a growing dread amongst many Asian American community leaders. It was only worsened when government leaders were really racializing COVID-19. COVID-19 was called coronavirus, the Kung flu, the China virus. We at AAJA realized early on how this may be used against Asian Americans. And as early as February 2020, we issued guidance to newsrooms to exercise caution in how they were reporting. We can tell really here that there is a need to educate more Americans about the Asian American experience, our contributions, how nuanced our history has been, and the fact that we've been missing in history. And the response to the Asian American community at this time just shows that.
And are there particular areas or pockets of society that are being targeted the most?
That's a good question. Having lived in some major cities of the U.S., unfortunately, there is no pocket that hasn't been affected by this. Cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, we've seen it in pretty much every corner of the country, and that's very much troubling and speaks to a deep-seated problem that we need to face, that this racism exists, and we need to come together to confront it.
As you mentioned, there's a real need to raise awareness about this. Would you agree, though, that not enough is being done to address this rise in hate crimes against Asians nationwide?
Yvonne, absolutely. Not enough is being done. I think this requires a whole of society response, as many of our community leaders have been saying, from the federal government, from local municipalities, and also from the media.
How does that make you feel, being an Asian American woman working in the media? What more can be done?
Part of our mission at AAJA is to ensure accurate and equitable representation of Asian Americans. So as far as the media's role in this, it's very important that the media doubles down on inclusion and diversity efforts. You can see we issued a guidance the day after the shooting to make sure that newsrooms were adequately equipped to cover the shooting and any kind of attack against Asian Americans. So as AAJA, we're going to keep holding media accountable. We're going to continue supporting the Asian American community and the Asian American journalists as they do the work to provide the nuanced contextual coverage that's needed to really represent Asian Americans and other communities of color in America.
And are you already seeing results? And are you hopeful that you and others doing similar work across the country are making enough of an impact to make a difference?
I'm actually very hopeful, despite the stress and despite the frustrations. What's really heartening is I was an Asian American Studies minor in college, and I'm seeing now upcoming generations, folks in college, young journalists, really starting to own their identity and own more of the history that we all need to embody as we go forward and do the work of really confronting racism. So yes, I'm hopeful.
And Naomi, just finally, what role does social media have in all of this when it comes to tackling hate crimes against Asians?
A very good question, and I know many of us have had numerous conversations about social media's role. I think it can be a force for bad or it can be a force for good. And the way that the Asian American community has mobilized and educated and come together on social media is one of those really great examples where social media can be used for good, for educating, for organizing, for responding.
Naomi Tacuyan Underwood, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.